All right, we had a problem in the recording of the previous Proverbs video, and so I'm going to do a quick recap of Proverbs section 4 that we are in. So a reminder to everybody about what we're doing. Reading a chapter of Proverbs a day. Started 22 days ago, so we started with Proverbs 1. Second week we were at Proverbs 8, and then Proverbs 15, and so we should be at Proverbs 22 by today. I mostly want to focus on Proverbs 17 today. And before we get too far into it, though, I wanted to ask if everyone had thought at all about what this verse means. Where no oxen are, the manger is clean, but much revenue comes by the strength of the ox. Where no oxen are, the manger is clean, but much revenue comes by the strength of the ox. The best summary I have heard of this verse is that life is mess. So the verse says, there's no oxes, the manger is clean, where the oxen is obviously not making any mess if he's not there. But the whole reason that the ox is there is because there is gain in having animals, in working the animals. But there's always byproducts of mess. We can get the idea when we look at our surroundings that cleanliness is the goal. Obviously, it's one of our goals, but the goal of life is to have a purpose, that you're accomplishing something. And to accomplish something is going to be messy. And so I really appreciated that summary, life is mess. Where no oxen are, the manger is clean. Much revenue comes by the strength of the ox. Before we get to Proverbs 17, I wanted to also catch this one verse from Proverbs 15 that I thought was really powerful. Proverbs 15:19 says, "The way of the lazy is a hedge of thorns, but the path of the upright is a highway." The way of the lazy is as a hedge of thorns, but the path of the upright is a highway. So this really refers to the way we look at our surroundings. And this is a scary thing. It says that the way of lazy is as a hedge of thorns, but the path of the upright is a highway. And it's not, the meaning of this verse is not as if lazy people invariably have a hard time out there, that there are just so much more obstacles in their way, but that it's an easy way to go for those who are upright. It's that, one, as we talk about in other verses, God looks out for the upright. But two, to be in a state of laziness affects what you look at and what you see. When you look outside, you focus on the negatives. You focus on the things that would hold you back. There's another verse in Proverbs that says that the lazy person tells everyone there's a lion out there. I can't go outside. We cannot live afraid always of our surroundings. Wisdom is to know about our surroundings, but courage is to realize there is danger, that we may fail, that it might not go our way, but that we push anyway. So that was a powerful verse, and a really important thing as far as self-knowledge is one of our big focuses looking through Proverbs, which is our own perspective is informed by our virtues and our values. The way we view the world is affected by the state of our heart. So the state of our heart is really important, because the state of our heart determines what we will do, how we will live, and what we perceive when we look. So let's read Proverbs 17 now. Let's look at this together. Actually, I grabbed this here. Proverbs 17. All right. Better a dry crust eaten in peace than a house filled with feasting and conflict. A wise servant will rule over the master's disgraceful son and will share in the inheritance of the master's children. Fire tests the purity of silver and gold, but the Lord tests the heart. Wrongdoers eagerly listen to gossip. Liars pay close attention to slander. Those who mock the poor insult their Maker. Those who rejoice at the misfortune of others will be punished. Grandchildren are the crowning glory of the aged. Parents are the pride of their children. Eloquent words are not fitting for a fool. Even less are lies fitting for a ruler. A bribe is like a lucky charm. Whoever gives one will prosper. Love prospers when a fault is forgiven, but dwelling on it separates close friends. A single rebuke does more for a person of understanding than 100 lashes on the back of a fool. Evil people are eager for rebellion, but they will be severely punished. It is safer to meet a bear robbed of her cubs than to confront a fool caught in foolishness. If you repay good with evil, evil will never leave your house. Starting a quarrel is like opening a floodgate, so stop before a dispute breaks out. Acquitting the guilty and condemning the innocent, both are detestable to the Lord. It is senseless to pay tuition to educate a fool, since he has no heart for learning. A friend is always loyal, and a brother is born to help in time of need. It's poor judgment to guarantee another person's debt or put up security for a friend. Anyone who loves to quarrel loves sin. Anyone who trusts in high walls invites disaster. The crooked heart will not prosper. The lying tongue tumbles into trouble. It is painful to be the parent of a fool. There is no joy for the father of a rebel. A cheerful heart is good medicine, but a broken spirit saps a person's strength. The wicked takes secret bribes to pervert the course of justice. Sensible people keep their eyes glued on wisdom, but a fool's eyes wander to the ends of the earth. Foolish children bring grief to their father and bitterness to the one who gave them birth. It is wrong to punish the godly for being good or to flog leaders for being honest. A truly wise person uses few words. A person with understanding is even-tempered. Even fools are thought wise when they keep silent. With their mouths shut, they seem intelligent. Now, there is a theme that I really want us to focus on tonight, and that theme is learning. There's a fair amount in this chapter about learning, about what's important to understand about learning. And actually that last verse reminds me of a really important person, a world leader in history, and also a great story about learning. So that last verse said, even fools are thought wise when they keep silent. With their mouths shut, they seem intelligent. The way Abraham Lincoln usually recounted a sentiment like this was, it's better to be thought a fool and keep silent than to open one's mouth and confirm the notion. It's better to be thought a fool and keep silent than to open one's mouth and confirm the notion. Abraham Lincoln grew up, if you are not aware, in the woods in Kentucky and then Indiana and then ended up in Illinois. And he grew up with around 5 books in his house. Looks like the 5 books were the Bible and Pilgrim's Progress, poems by Lord Byron, Robinson Crusoe, and this book, Aesop's Fables. This is a collection of ancient Greek stories. After I tell you a little bit about Abraham Lincoln, I want to read one or two of these, and I want us to be thinking about what advantages and disadvantages, comparing kind of the education situation that we find ourselves in versus Abraham Lincoln, and maybe get some insight into how he excelled in his situation and hopefully how we can too. So Abraham Lincoln was born to poor parents, and in a time when there's not going to be much to do besides work hard, read, and talk to your family. So he did work hard. Worked hard. Splitting wood is fairly legendary about him. But grew up working hard and learned to read from his mother. Came to really take in the few books that he did have, but then it became legendary that he would walk a couple of miles to borrow a book from a friend or from a library. He wrote in his little scrapbook, like a little sum book is what he called it, so that if he thought of something interesting or if he read something interesting, he'd write it down in this little book that he would carry around with him. And this survived after he died, this little poem that he wrote when he was young. Abraham Lincoln, his hand and pen, he will be good, but God knows when. And Lincoln was fascinated by the way words worked, the way words connected, and taught himself to read. Later left home and worked very hard as a rail splitter before he then became a lawyer. Very little formal education, but he did love to read. Other books that came to be his favorites as his life went on were The Life and Memorable Actions of George Washington. And so we should think about the advantages that he experienced. The advantages, his lack of overload meant that he had time to reflect on what he did have. He didn't have the distractions that we had. You can imagine him sitting on the porch of his house, maybe at dusk. They talk about how he would sit by a very dim light and read into the night, but the fact of the matter is that we have a lot of things that distract us, and he didn't have to deal with that. So there were advantages to his system. There were certainly disadvantages. Not very much choice in what he was going to read. He read a book called Euclid's Elements. And this is a book about the theory behind geometry and how that kind of math works. Kind of a philosophy book in a way, but it was early. And so Lincoln was fascinated by these kinds of things. If you don't know, when he became president, he didn't know much of anything about military strategy, and obviously that became important because he was president during the Civil War. He had to learn about military strategy to be able to guide, advise, and even understand what was happening in the Civil War. And we still have the records of the books that he checked out from the Library of Congress, and can see the things that he was learning about in that time. So let's think for a minute about the advantages to our system. One is the access to information that we have. Now, it can be an overload, but look, we can find out information, facts, opinions about just about anything. It's a little overwhelming to us. But it's powerful to have this. In a lot of ways, our situation is flipped from what he dealt with, and that is that we have access to this information, but we have to figure out how to sift through it and how to maintain motivation when it can become just overwhelming, the information overload that we experience. And so if we can figure out how to maintain motivation, we will be there, though. That is we got to recognize that's the challenge that we face, and that is life-changing for us. That would be a game changer if we can figure out how to maintain that motivation. Because there are disadvantages to our system. That you learn a lot of stuff that you don't care about, and that wears you down. That we spend a lot of time learning about things that we might not be interested in. We have this issue that since we can learn about, say, math or grammar or art, before we really know what we want to do with our life, what decisions, the decision to what kind of specialty we're going to have comes later. And so we can learn these basics, but that can wear us down to have to learn all of these different disciplines. It's just not an area of interest. So we can become tired and lethargic about that. Overall, there are advantages and disadvantages to both of these systems. We get information, but we don't necessarily get instruction. Watching a teacher teach through a YouTube video is different and frankly inferior to being directly taught. So it goes a part of the way, but not the whole way. So, stories like this captivated Lincoln. Listen to this story called The Old Lion. A lion, enfeebled by age and no longer able to procure food for himself by force, determined to do so by cunning. Betaking himself to a cave, he lay down inside and feigned to be sick, and whenever any of the other animals entered to inquire after his health, he sprang upon them and devoured them. Many lost their lives in this way, till one day a fox called at the cave, and having a suspicion of the truth, addressed the lion from outside instead of going in, and asked how he did. He replied that he was in a very bad way. But, said he, why do you stand outside? Pray come in. Well, I should have done so, answered the fox, if I hadn't noticed all the footprints point toward the cave, and none the other way. So these kind of stories teach us about life, about how to be wary of details. But in this other story, this is just a little bit about practical social skills. Listen to this story about the boy bathing. A boy was bathing in a river and got out of his depth and was in great danger of being drowned. A man who was passing along a road heard his cries for help and went to the riverside and began to scold him for being so careless as to get into deep water, but made no attempt to help him. "Oh, sir," cried the boy, "please help me first and scold me afterward. Give assistance, not advice, in a crisis. Give assistance, not advice, in a crisis." Some of them have a moral that's direct to them, and so I appreciate that. This kind of conforms to our idea of nobody likes to be told, "I told you so." Give assistance, not advice, in a crisis. So these are great because they teach a life lesson a lot of times, too. And Lincoln was drawn to these. It was pretty legendary that he would have a story like this for almost any situation, often multiple stories, and they stuck with people. So I'm going to read one more, and then we'll move on from this. This is the Quack Frog. Once upon a time, a frog came forth from his home in the marshes and proclaimed to all the world that he was a learned physician, skilled in drugs and able to cure all diseases. And among the crowd was a fox who called out, "You, a doctor? Why, how can you set up to heal others when you cannot even cure your own lame legs and blotched and wrinkled skin?" The point? Physician, heal thyself. So that story is about being wary of people who promise a get-well-quick scheme. Make sure all of their sicknesses are healed. So, there's a lot of these kind of stories. I really like Aesop's fables. Here's what I want to do. I want us to look at a few verses in particular here and consider what is being taught about learning in this section. So in verse 10, it says this: "A single rebuke does more for a person of understanding than 100 lashes on the back of a fool. Evil people are eager for rebellion, but they will be severely punished. It is safer to meet a bear robbed of her cubs than to confront a fool caught in foolishness. The summary of this is some people cannot be taught, and that the capacity for learning is much higher in some people. A single rebuke does more for a person of understanding than 100 lashes on the back of a fool. The assumption in that verse is that there are people who are people of understanding, and there are people who are not people of understanding. There are fools. Nobody wants to be called a fool, but there are people who don't want to change. Evil people are eager for rebellion. They'll be severely punished. Some people are eager for rebellion. They are looking for an opportunity to rebel, and then they will find that opportunity, no matter what. Those people are dangerous to be around. Sooner or later, trouble will show up. Some people are more apt to learn than others. My point in talking about the differences between our situation as far as education and Abraham Lincoln's is that some of us do not think of ourselves as liking to learn. And even though I completely agree that some of our educational situation might wear us out, we should want to be learners. We should want to grow and learn. I really like Final Fantasy games, role-playing games. These games are considered boring by some people. And recently, by the way, today actually, Final Fantasy VII Remake comes out, which is a game came out in the 90s, and they're remaking it again. These games have a popularity, and I realized later when I was playing World of Warcraft what it is that I really like about these kind of games. So in these games, you'll have a character or multiple characters, and your character will kill monsters and get experience points, and then experience points will level up your character, and you might learn spells, or you might gain hit points so you can take more damage, you might gain magic points so you can do more damage, or depending on your role, maybe you'll be able to heal more people, or do special moves and these sorts of things. But strangely enough, while I was fishing in World of Warcraft one time, I noticed what it is that is one of the really captivating elements about these games. So I had never cared about fishing in this game. I thought it was a dumb idea to fish in a game where you're running around in this world. It's a lot like the world of Lord of the Rings or fantasy world. And then you stop and, take your elf over and you start fishing in the ocean or something. And I thought it was dumb, but then I remember I tried it one time. I equipped my fishing pole and I walked out and I casted it out and I watched my little bobber, and when it moved, I reeled in an imaginary fish on World of Warcraft. And I remember looking down in the bottom right side of the screen, and it said, "Your skill in fishing has improved by 1 to 2." So I was like, well, my skill in fishing went from 1 to 2. I'll go ahead and cast again. Caught a second fish. Your skill in fishing has increased to 3. Your skill in fishing has increased to 4. Sat there, and I just kept on casting, and I noticed that it's an idea that I really like. This idea of growing, this idea of increasing, of getting stronger. And a lot of these games contribute to that idea that you're getting better, you're getting stronger. I think it appeals to all of us, this idea of getting stronger. We all do want to learn. It's just that this can become burnt out in us. I wonder if any of you have ever been down what I call like a Wikipedia rabbit hole, where you're, say, looking up Friends episodes, and then you look up maybe names of episodes, or say you look up an old TV show from when you were a kid, a cartoon, and you could look up every Scooby-Doo movie that was made, or maybe old toys. You could look up how many Barbie dolls were sold in the year that you got into Barbie dolls. Or because on Wikipedia, you can keep clicking through and learning about all kinds basically anything under the sun, anything that you can imagine. Actually, this is the way that I really got into understanding and knowing about the background of the Lord of the Rings. So say, for instance, a character like Saruman, you could you could put in his name, and then while you're reading the article about Saruman, it would mention that he's one of 7 wizards who were sent by Iluvatar to Middle-earth, and you might go, well, who's Iluvatar? Well, you can click on Iluvatar, and then you can read the article on Iluvatar. And by the way, Iluvatar is the name for God Almighty in Tolkien's Legendarium. And you can end up easily hours and hours later having clicked all through the different articles that you run into and learning. It is imperative that we do not lose the impulse for learning. Learning is huge for us. We are made to learn. It's really important that we distinguish in our mind kind of an educational process and what it is to be a learner, what it is to enjoy learning. You can learn about whatever you want, and we have interests, and most of the time we will live towards our interests. We will focus on things that we're interested in, and that's okay. Let your learning side flourish, and don't let it be beat down by the fact that you often have to learn about things that you're less interested in. A couple of other encouragements that I have for us before I give us some takeaways. You should learn your learning style. Simplest learning style plan is the visual, auditory, kinesthetic learning style. You should know if you're the kind of person who is good at visualizing and who really can learn by seeing, so that you could watch someone, say, change a tire, and then see it happening in your head and do it because you can still visualize it. If you're an auditory learner, you could have someone explain to you how to change a tire. What are the steps and what are the things that you need to keep in mind about it? A good way to tell if you're an auditory learner is if you can listen to an audiobook, especially like an audiobook that explains how to do things while you're driving down the road and are able to focus on it, then you probably have at least a reasonably high auditory learning kind of standard. And if you can't, then it may not be your thing. So for me, those are the two. I'm a little more auditory maybe than visual, but it's pretty balanced for me. And the third one is not as much for me, and that is the kinesthetic, or the learning by doing. So you can think about changing a tire. How do you do it? Well, you get the tire iron in your hand, and you get down there and start messing with it. And that is the best summary that I can come up with for a kinesthetic learner. Mess with the stuff. Put your hands on it. Excuse me. Get the feel of it. Learn it by doing it. We have different learning styles, and that is totally fine. That is the way we are made to be different. There's a lot of different inventories of what our learning styles can be. But I would encourage you to explore your own, to know how you learn, and then to play to your strengths when you are learning as much as possible. Look, if you are a kinesthetic learner and you're working with geometry, get physical figures. All right? Get as much as you can. Cut out cheese into the shapes that you're dealing with. Get calipers or some kind of way to measure things when you're doing measurements, and make it physical for you. If you're a kinesthetic learner, get your hands on it. Play to your strengths. Play to your strengths. So, I want to give some takeaways before we close up here. Takeaways from this section. Here's the first one. Education fundamentally has a heart component, a moral component. There's a great question that we have mostly forgotten about in our typical educational setting, and that is, why should we want to know anything? Education is human, and we have nearly forgotten that. We have to help ourselves to answer the question about why it might be helpful for me to know all of this stuff. And when you get your heart in it, then it will help you to not get so burnt out on what you're doing. Education has a heart component. There is a why to a lot of these things, and searching for the why is important. It's worthwhile. Second takeaway, we will learn forever. We will learn forever. One of the reasons we should be a lifelong learner now is because we will learn for all eternity. We are small little things, and we will keep learning forever. This is, it bothers me when I hear people say things like, oh, when we get to heaven, we'll know everything. There is no evidence of that. In fact, we will continue to be small but growing things in heaven just like we are now. Yes, we will know fully even as we are fully known. That's a scriptural quotation. But that means we will not feel alone. We will be in a relationship that is complete and right, and we won't feel disconnected from God and each other. But we should be learners. And so figure out how to be a lifelong learner here, because you will be an eternal learner later. And then the last thing, last takeaway. You can fail and learn or fail and not learn. And I encourage the first one. The first one will save you a lot of trouble in your life. We will fail. I pray and I hope that we try things that are difficult that might cause us to fail, that are so difficult. Sometimes we will fail, but then we will learn and grow. Most people that we know only attempt things that they know they will, accomplish. And that's a safe way of living. Life is risk. We have to push ourselves and try things. This is one of the reasons I think sports is a really good thing to be involved in. You will win and you will lose in sports. You have got to have this experience. You've got to have this experience. You can fail and learn or fail and not learn. Learn from other people's failures. We've talked about this in the past as well. So those are the three takeaways. Education has a heart component. We will learn forever, and you can fail and learn or fail and not learn. So I wanted to upload this and share it with you. We missed it on Wednesday night. There was a problem with that recording, and so I wanted to get this out. I hope you're all doing great. I miss seeing you. I hope this will all settle down soon, and we'll be back together again. But until then, take care, and I hope to talk to you soon.